This one comes into us from a subscriber, so great example that if you send me story ideas, I actually do check them out and try to do videos as I have the time and availability to do so. And I thought this was a fun one to end the weekend, especially if you like to celebrate or mourn free speech online. Turns out that Susan Wojcicki has won a Free Expression Award. I don't know if she won it or she was just given it. If you look down here, these are the honorees, and here she is, CEO of YouTube, which has gotten some criticism considering YouTube has been a place of speech suppression over the last couple of years, and Susan Wojcicki, of course, at the helm of that. So probably not surprising if you scroll down that YouTube is a sponsor of these awards. And if you check out who's on the steering committee and honorary host committee, really the honorary host committee is the most interesting. We see people like Amy Klobuchar, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Lester Holt was the MC. And you know what? I got to meet Lester Holt in Rio when I was covering the Olympics, and really nice guy actually, but a little bit disappointed with him in his most recent speech where he won a Lifetime Achievement Award, a Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award in journalism from Washington State University, not too far from where we live in Eastern Washington, and said what a lot of mainstream news anchors and journalists say, which is, you know, we can't have misinformation. We don't need to be spreading misinformation. And just because there's a bunch of different sides of a story doesn't mean they're all equal in weight, and that we have to promote ideas that we know are wrong, which I would say in theory, it sounds like a great idea. The problem is, well, journalists don't often know actually what is true or false because for the variety of reasons we've discussed on this channel, sometimes they don't have time to do the research. Sometimes they don't care to do the research. This is why, like I said, many journalists, especially mainstream journalists, will look at this and say, yeah, duh, of course, and they'll be clapping when somebody receives an award and talks about that. And I'm somebody in the back of the room that's like, yeah, that would be great if actually you guys knew the difference between true and false all of the time and weren't sort of victims of your own propaganda campaign. So I'll leave that there. I just think that it's interesting that it does seem a little bit like this is kind of a sort of groupie mainstream corporate award ceremony. And not to be a hater because I have won my share of those. I just think it's funny that this is happening after a year of real controversy over speech suppression online. And I will say, you know what? I'm still glad for the ability that I have on a platform like YouTube right now. I talk about the shortcomings because I want actually YouTube to know there are people like me out there who came from mainstream corporate news and don't agree with the calls for speech suppression that many of my peers are giving. So maybe they'll pay attention and say, you know what, there is a variety of opinion, or maybe they will just totally ignore me and deplatform me. I don't know. It's possible. That's why I'm on other platforms. And this is before we get started into the rest of it. An order of business. Make sure you're checking out the links in the description. Other places you can find me, other places you can support my work. It is Anti-Authoritarianism April as we continue on with the demonetization of my channel, which I have self-demonetized, my choice. So links for how you can support me, platforms that you can support my work. I will be on ROKFIN very soon, actually, hopefully tomorrow if I can get my act together, so check me out there. First, let's just take a listen to this video. It's opened with one of the YouTube influencers, and then we'll listen to a few quotes by Susan herself.
When billions of people are on your platform every day, how do you make sure that everybody has a voice but also feels safe?
That's impossible. That is impossible. It is impossible for everybody to have free speech and everybody to feel safe. So I think if that's where we're going towards, no wonder that people are questioning whether free expression is in fact happening on YouTube. On to a few quotes from Susan Wojcicki herself.
And so we think about ourselves as a platform for the next generation of media companies to be able to create content and to distribute it to the world. We're removing content that violates our policies. You can go too far, and that can become censorship. And so we have been working really hard to figure out what's the right way to balance responsibility with freedom of speech.
Take from that what you will. Big picture for me, I do not envy Susan Wojcicki's position. I'll start there, okay? I know it's not an easy job. And I know probably was an easier job when she took over, I think 7 years ago. Though I will say YouTube has been different under her leadership. And I think, granted, we've had an interesting, to say the least, political climate over the last 4 to 5 years. So you can't totally blame it on her. But if this were YouTube 10 or 12 years ago, I would have a very different viewpoint on it. I think YouTube did start out as a place where there was an amazing, really truly historic, amazing freedom of speech allowed. And even now, we're still, I think, I think it would be intellectually dishonest for me to say that we're not at least lucky to have something like this. I mean, I am for free talking to you all wherever you are in the world. That is something to really celebrate, but it also means we need to push back and try to preserve what we have and try to regain, I think, some of the ground that we've lost. And again, when you look at who was at this award ceremony, who's funding the award ceremony, it does kind of remind me again of sort of the sort of mainstream journalism awards where it's like, everybody's just a groupie. They're already in. It's a pay to play situation. So I don't really take the award that seriously anyway. Like, I need to rant about, oh my gosh, can you believe that YouTube won this award? I don't even take it seriously enough to be that upset about it. I just thought it was an interesting opportunity to show that when you have the Freedom Forum Institute, for instance, which has a First Amendment center here, doing this award ceremony where, it's obvious that this is a year where there's been a lot of contention around the First Amendment and whether the government is pressuring and overstepping its boundary, its legal boundary, and pressuring these social media companies to do what they say. And even if you don't consider it a First Amendment issue, because I know that's kind of, that's being battled out in court right now. You just consider it a private company that has its own rights to choose what it wants on its sites. I still think it's interesting that you're seeing a Freedom Forum give YouTube one of these awards, almost as if to say, to sort of push off the critics, if you will, like almost knowing that there's a huge swath of the country that is very, very skeptical and some very angry about what's happening online, and almost as if to sort of say, you know what, go pound sand. I guess to me, it just shows that there's a significant disconnect in the country right now between people who do consider even the speech suppression that's happening, they still consider that part of free speech because they, I guess, don't consider misinformation, however they would label it. They don't consider that necessarily in the realm of what's allowable or even virtuous to be expressed. So there's sort of one personality that's thinking that is free speech. We're not saying that this isn't free speech. Misinformation, dangerous information, that's not free speech. And then the other side that's like, no, it is free speech. It should be allowed. Speech suppression is dangerous. And I don't know if these two sides are ever, I don't know if they can communicate. It's almost like it's such different ways of looking at it. It's like a totally different language. And the more that I listen to both sides of this, I'm like, somehow this rationalization has taken these different ways of looking at it to places of thought and theory about it all that I don't quite know how we ever come to a compromise on it. I don't know, but I'd like to hear from you in the comment section. What do you think about this? Do you think this was a fair a fair award and an award that should have been won? Or do you think that, this is just kind of a hokey, sell it to the public as something that a bunch of elitists who don't have a grasp on half of the country are doing just to, kind of virtue signal to everybody? I don't know. What do you think? Just leave me a comment in the comment section. Love to hear from you. Don't forget, again, links in the description for how you can support my work during Anti-Authoritarianism April, and I will see you next time.